I, a 52-year-old woman at the time this happened, was traveling by car to an out-of-town job assignment. I had stopped at a popular and busy gas station/travel stop to fill up the car, stretch my legs, use the bathroom, and grab a snack. While I was in the middle of doing this, I was approached by a developmentally disabled woman who appeared to be in her mid-20s. She said she was looking for a ride to a town a couple of towns over. Her previous ride had seemingly abandoned her while she went off to use the restroom. Needless to say, she was more than a little bit upset. She didn't have a cell phone and didn't know any phone numbers either, so I couldn't call someone to come help her. I checked with the employees at the store, and they said she'd been out there for an hour looking for a ride. She told them her friends had left her while she was in the restroom as well. I made the decision to do something I've never done before in that moment: offer a stranger a ride. I wasn't going to the town she wanted to go to, but I was headed in that direction. I told her I could at least drop her off at the grocery store in the next town over, where I would be turning off to go to my destination. That particular store was always busy, and it was very likely she'd have an easier time getting a ride to where she wanted there. She'd also end up 5 miles away from where she wanted to go instead of 25 miles now, and she'd have an easier time walking that distance if the worst came to pass. She found this agreeable, and we set off together. Right away, as soon as we left though, I noticed a van started following us. I tried my best to lose this van, but it kept pace with us perfectly. Meanwhile, the woman kept saying she wanted to play with my phone now. I told her no, it wasn't a toy. It was my work phone, so I moved it out of her reach. The van sped up and started to get closer. Suddenly, the woman told me she remembered her boyfriend's phone number and we needed to call him right now. Obviously, I couldn't use my phone while I was driving. This was pre-car sync voice-activated operation. I was approaching the outskirts of the business district of the next town. No cell phone use while driving signs were everywhere. I tried to tell her, "We're almost there anyway, you can just call him from the parking lot when we get there." She became very agitated though and kept on screaming, "No, you have to take me home." "Well, I told you I can't do that. I'm not going there. It's in the opposite direction of where I need to go, and I'm expected soon. We can just call him from the lot." She became more and more upset and frustrated, and the van was getting closer and closer. I pulled into the store parking lot. It was about 4 p.m., and the grocery store was quite busy as usual. I pulled up in front and asked for her boyfriend's phone number. Well, wouldn't you know it, suddenly she couldn't remember his number anymore. She refused to get out of the car and started arguing with me. The van pulled up in the parking lot next to us. There was a sheriff's deputy parked nearby, thankfully. I rolled down my window and signaled that I needed to speak with him right away. He walked over and asked me what was going on. I told him the story about the woman and how she wouldn't get out of my car now, under my breath so she couldn't hear. I also told him a suspicious van had been following us. The deputy spoke to the woman. "Come on, miss. She brought you where you asked her to. It's time for you to leave the car now." She slowly got out of the car, and I asked once more for her boyfriend's number. She looked at me like I was crazy. "What do you mean? I don't have a boyfriend." "Oh, look, there are my friends now." She pointed to that damn van that had been following us. The deputy and I shared a look. He leaned in to whisper to me, "Give me your contact info. I can delay them for about 20 minutes while I check their license and registration and lecture them about abandoning a special needs adult. Why don't you get out of here and I'll check up on you when my shift is over. And don't pick up any more hitchhikers in the future." I left soon after and went to my destination. The deputy called me to make sure I got where I was going safely and told me they were keeping an eye on the van and its owner. He also told me he'd contacted a colleague at the sheriff's department in the county where I was working and that she would contact me in a day or two as well. While I was on assignment there, I spoke to 2 deputies and a detective about the woman in the suspicious van. No one ever told me anything about them, but it was clear they were very interested in them for whatever reason. My nightmare is that one day I'll turn on a true crime show or something and see a report about this woman and her gang robbing or killing someone. This story starts back in 2017 when my boyfriend and I just started living together. Rent in our country has been really high for years now, so after looking for a long while, we decided to emigrate. Our college is very close to the border between our country and the neighboring country, and in the neighboring country, the rents are way lower. After a few months of searching, we found an apartment there. It used to be the old hay attic of a farm, I guess, but a rich couple, the landlords, had turned the attic into an apartment years ago and turned the rest of the house into a home for themselves. We actually quite liked the place and readily signed the rental agreement. We moved in September of 2017. At first, all was great. We really liked our landlord and his wife, even though they were fairly eccentric. After a while, things became less comfortable though. The landlord would blast loud music at all hours of the night. If he asked him to fix something, he would show up at 2 a.m. He constantly bragged about how he kicked out the previous tenants after they'd told him the rent was too high. When rats infested our roof, ceiling, and created holes that went straight outside, he'd use expanding foam to kill them, trapping the rats in the process, which led to them dying and decomposing in the ceiling. You can just imagine the smell. Most importantly, he would knock on our door for minutes on end, and if we didn't answer, he would just stand underneath our window staring before yelling our names over and over. It was like he knew we were there but just ignoring him somehow. Once he even managed to get into the apartment without permission. I got home sweaty as hell, so I walked into the bathroom. When I came out wrapped in a towel and walked toward the living room, he suddenly burst in through the front door. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me he'd left his key in our house after a visit, even though he'd used that very same key to get in just now. The last points finally clicked when we moved out though. The landlord was about to move away to Poland, and the new landlord was an asshole, so we decided to just move out. We told the previous one about this, and he said, "Well, can you give me back my camera at least?" We thought he was joking at first, but after he left, we suddenly got a weird feeling about this, so we decided to check. The apartment had a very high pointed ceiling, so we had to use a large ladder to climb up there. What we found though, on the high horizontal beam, was a small camera pointed down to our living room. I think I still have the video somewhere of my boyfriend cutting the wire. All of a sudden, the cam network we'd see on the Wi-Fi list all the time on our phones was gone as well. We moved out and thought about pressing charges, but this man had a great lawyer and was long gone by then. I really do need to say I hope we don't meet again, as recently one of our new neighbors told us a man called the landlord's name was on our street looking for us for some reason. I was just chatting to a friend when I remembered this creepy story from the pandemic. I, 30 and female, lived alone. I had no car and there were no shops nearby either. It was about 9 p.m. and I'd just gotten back from work when I realized there was no food in the house. I ordered a grocery delivery on Uber Eats. I asked them to leave it at the door due to COVID rules. There was a knock at the door later, and I saw a tall, skinny man standing right by it. I shouted through the letterbox to leave it on the floor and back off. He said no and that he had to hand it to me, as it had alcohol inside the order. I hadn't ordered any alcohol myself, so I told him he must have the wrong delivery. He simply claimed it was correct. I told him to put it on the floor and back up again. He refused once more. Stupidly, I opened the door a crack to tell him to do it due to COVID rules and that this was getting quite annoying. He stepped towards the door in that moment and grabbed the handle fiercely. I pulled the door shut before he could do anything and shouted at him to leave or I was reporting him. He put the order down and stepped back. I asked him through the letterbox to back up further. He did, but again, when I opened the door, he tried to rush at me once more. I always remember I felt a chill down my spine in that moment when I heard him muttering, "Pretty, very pretty," in a low monotone voice. I also noticed he had his phone out pointed at me and asked him what he was doing through the door. He said he had to take a picture, but it was pointed at my face, not the bag on the floor. I quickly opened the door, snatched it up, and slammed it behind me, then locked up tight. I watched through a crack in the curtains as he just stood there by my door, pacing back and forth as if he couldn't make up his mind on something. He knocked over and over, but I tried my best to ignore him. I was getting seriously creepy vibes now and called my best mate for some advice. She told me to report him and not to open the door again no matter what. I shouted for him to leave, but he continued to stand there in front of my door. My dog, who's normally the sweetest thing, had picked up on my anxiety and began barking at the man as well. He turned around and got into his car that was parked across the street from my house. He made it look like he was going to leave, but I kept watching for the next 20 or so minutes through my window, and he just sat there. He continued staring at my house. I figured at first maybe he was picking another order to take or something, but then suddenly a message popped up on Uber. He told me he'd forgotten a bag in his car and asked me to come out and get it from him. I checked my order and everything was right there. I messaged him, saying that couldn't possibly be correct. He got very agitated and insistent, saying he couldn't leave until I came out to him and picked it up. He was practically begging me to come out to his car, saying it wouldn't take more than a minute and I could simply grab it from in his passenger side. I lost my shit. I told him I'd heard what he said earlier, and I knew he was taking a picture of me, not the order. I was going to call the police right now. He still insisted I had to come outside. The entire time I was on the phone with the police, he was still messaging me, even saying, "The police won't come. Come on, pick up the order and I'll leave. Why are you making it so hard on us?" The police told me someone would be there within 20 minutes and to stay inside with all doors and windows locked. My dog was going nuts now. My neighbor's husband, who was 6'4" and built like a brick shed, texted me saying he'd heard a commotion outside and asking if I was okay. I told him about what was going on. He immediately ran outside, screaming at the driver to fuck off before he got fucked up. The delivery guy peeled out of there. My neighbors rushed over to make me a brew and wait for the police. I made a report to both them and Uber, but all I got was an apology from Uber. The police never got back to me. I got a car shortly thereafter and never had to use Uber again, at least until my boyfriend moved in. When I was around 19 or so, I worked nights at this shitty hotel chain in my hometown. It was generally pretty chill though. You'd get your occasional weirdos and creeps, but I could pretty much handle my own, and I got used to this pretty quickly. However, one guy was way worse than anything I'd ever encountered up until that point. It was an average night, spent checking guests in, doing laundry, stalking, etc. There were 2 sets of doors at the entrance, the inner ones being locked after the night shift started. It was around 3 a.m. or so when this guy just randomly shows up and rings me through the lobby phone set between the 2 doors. Immediately, before I could even get my customer service on, he started frantically demanding I call medical transport. I didn't really know what he was talking about, but I tried my best to help him, asking him questions to further identify the situation. Eventually, I was just going to let him in so I could get a better idea of how to help him. When I went to do so though, his tone immediately changed. He started speaking in this monotone voice and had this kind of dead stare. I'd never before seen eyes so devoid of all emotion. Not to mention, he had no signs of physical injury or any distress at all. Obviously, I was freaked out, but tried my best to carry on normally, asking him more questions. After the first two, he just stopped answering completely though, and only continued to stare at me. I tried repeating myself, but now he was just eyeing me like a wild animal. At this point, I was starting to get pretty fed up with his behavior. "Alright, well, I'm just gonna call 911 to get you help." He then started to get all frantic, going between begging me not to call and saying, "They won't let me go. I can't go back there." I told him I had no idea how to help him if he wouldn't let me call emergency services. He needed to leave right now. He didn't seem to even need medical assistance in the first place. This guy went right back to ignoring everything I said and just staring at me. Honestly, I should have called the police right then and there, but I was overwhelmed by this man, and getting the police involved was always a last resort for me. "Alright, well, you can wait there for 20 minutes and try to find alternative transportation, but then you really need to go." I went into the back to watch him on the cameras, from where I was safer. 20 minutes went by. I came out to tell him to leave, but then he just started yelling nonsensically. I went into the back once more. The man waited there for 2 more hours. Finally, I told him I was calling the police, to which he replied, "Well, if you're going to do that, I'll just leave then." It was almost comical at this point. "Please do so, I've wanted that this whole time." I was so done with him that I was basically yelling. The man ran outside. I did call the cops and report him soon after. The freakiest part though, is that while I was telling my boyfriend about this guy, he recognized him from my description of his blank stare. He pulled up this mugshot, and I could see he had charges for rape, aggravated sexual assault, and a bunch of other terrible shit. You see, my boyfriend worked at a homeless shelter for some years and had seen the guy from time to time. After that, I felt so lucky that he just left on his own. Who knows what would have gone down in different circumstances. I normally go walking in the woods with a friend, and today nobody was available, so I went by myself about 7 p.m. I parked the car and went into the entrance. There was one other car there, and a jogger who passed me on my way in. I decided to go off the main track. There's a smaller track about 10 to 20 meters down that you can follow instead if you wanted to. It's a wooded area, but you can easily get back to the main track in 5 minutes if you really want to. I was debating if I should continue on the smaller track, go straight and go back onto the main track, or go down into the more wooded area where there was a small pathway. So I'm just standing there trying to decide when I see a man in the distance on the main track walking toward the main entrance. At some point, the man seemed to notice me and stopped walking immediately. He was staring at me now, with a huge grin plastered on his face. He was in his 50s or 60s, and I was getting an extremely creepy vibe. My guts basically dropped out. I was thinking that if I walked back onto the main track, he'd be waiting there for me. If he stopped staring and continued walking the main track, we'd meet up later on, and nobody else would probably be there. I was thinking he would continue walking on, and I'd just wait a while for him to leave and go. I was feeling super unsafe and regretting coming here all by myself. He ended up walking down the hill at a diagonal, while I saw he was still staring straight at me. He was making a beeline for me. I was now freaking out. I could only hope he was going to go down the other pathway. There was nobody walking the main track. I started walking faster. I noticed he was now doing a C shape, coming down to where I was standing previously. Now he was moving even faster and was right behind me. He wasn't exactly running, but his eyes were fixated on me. He was moving fast, and he'd been smirking ever since he spotted me. I was really freaked out now. I got a bit further, to an area which was covered by trees on each side. I mean, this man was clearly following me now, right? Why else would he reverse his own path and go exactly where I was now walking to? He was about 6 meters away from me now. I was getting ready to run back to the entrance, which would take about 5 minutes from where I was. He was walking further to the right, so he would cross paths with me on the main track. I was freaking out. He could easily grab me, or he could even have a weapon. I was too scared to take my phone out and be distracted. The fact he'd been following me so closely, without a single word, only hearing the leaves breaking under his boots behind me in the woods while stalking me, was terrifying. At that point though, a couple spontaneously appeared. I was quite relieved. They were going really fast, so I was worried they'd just pass by me easily, and the man would start chasing me after they left. My car doors don't lock properly, and sometimes the engine stalls as well since it's an old shitter. I was freaking out that might happen once I arrived back to my car. The man stopped in his tracks though, after seeing that couple. I took the opportunity and began moving so fast. He was now moving super slow behind me, still staring, still sticking to the wooded areas, and doing that predatory stare for 10 minutes, fixated on me. When I got back to my car, I started it up and drove slowly by so I would be able to identify him properly. He didn't come out though until I was way down the road. I'm now wondering if I should have stayed parked and gotten a picture of him or something, or recorded him on video, and told him I would report him for following me. Maybe I should have told the couple I was being followed. I drove away super shaken up, and the man was gone from my life forever. I can't even describe the feeling. All I can remember is his creepy smirking face and really gray hair. I'm definitely lucky I managed to get out of there. I'm so furious that I can't even go for a short walk on a hiking trail without being in danger. I can't even imagine what would have happened if I'd met him further down into it.